All right. Hello, everyone. We are live for our last round, at least for the moment, of Chopping with the Stars here. Um, so, to wrap up this series of videos, we have the esteemed Roger Carter with us. You all know him from things like, from groups like the Performing with the Blue Devils, teaching the Blue Coats, teaching Broken City, and just being an all-around cool dude. You've all seen him sitting in the drum set sitting at the drum set in the parking lot. Which, by the way, Roger doesn't even know this. That article about that comes out next month in Percussive Notes. So the full story of that will be out there.
Cool.
So beyond that, I'm going to get out of the way and give it over to Roger.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be invited to your event. It's my pleasure here to drum with you all. And, I've watched some of the other videos from some of the other stars that have been chopping with you. I've tried to pick up on some things that were said and were talked about. And, today I wanted to chop out a little bit with you. A lot of the exercises that I provided are like 2 volume exercises. Things with that a lot of people refer to as heights. And as we get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about my approach to those kind of exercises. And that I try not to use the word heights and stick heights and such as often as maybe some other instructors do. I try to talk about volumes and playing with with sound level definitions more than height definitions, right? So I try to use the words piano and mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo, instead of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I suppose I do that for a number of reasons. For number one, I think that the sound that you produce is the ultimate concern, right? It needs to sound good and be rhythmically accurate and in time before it looks a certain way. So I try to think of terms of sound first and technique second. And I suppose another reason I don't use the 15 that a lot of times people will use, because I have my little tape measure right here, and a lot of people will call this 15, and 15 is way down there. So I don't really like to use the inches definition too much, because it's just simply not accurate. And if we're talking about calling this a 15-inch stroke, well, it certainly isn't. It's more like 18 or 19. So I just call this fortissimo. So if I'm going to play up here, I'm playing fortissimo. And if I'm playing here, I'm forte, a little bit less than vert. And mezzo forte is right around here. And mezzo piano. And piano. Which, that one corresponds pretty accurately to the 3-inch definition that most instructors talk about, 3 for piano. But essentially it's flat to where the fulcrum is here. All right, so I try to use a system that really involves soft taps and strong accents. So I really like to maximize my dynamic range as a player and as a snare drummer, and that I like to have my taps low, both in terms of the height off the head, but more specifically the sound coming off the drum. So if I'm going to play something, if I'm going to play 2 heights or 2 sound volumes, so I really like to emphasize the low and soft and consistent sound down low, and then contrast that with a strong accented sound from all my bigger notes. So most of the exercises that I put here in the Dropbox are ones that deal with multiple volumes, with exception of maybe two of them. So I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different little exercises in there. A lot of them deal with Flam accents and how to really get stronger at playing some of our favorite rudiments. Right, a lot of kind of a cliched thing for I'd say for a marching snare drummer is wanting to play flam drags, cheeses, flam fives. I mean, almost everybody plays some form of shopping spree or the big three or whatever you want to call it exercises. So I like to kind of go over those a little bit and some primers on how to get stronger at playing those by isolating one hand at a time. I have a double stroke exercise in here, double and triple and quadruple stroke. A roll exercise, one that we play at the Bluecoats. That's kind of like short, long that a lot of people play. A lot of times you hear this one. Right. Well, this triplet rolls is. If that one is short, long, I call this one long, longer. And I like really long, extended phrases of rolls. So we have 4 counts a roll, 4 counts a roll, and then 12 counts a roll to just really give that extended, long phrase of sustaining sound for a while. And the first one I have in here is actually kind of a play off of most lines will play some form of legatos or eights. Right? Almost every line in the world plays something like this. And it makes sense, right? It's the first thing that helps get me loose, have my sticks moving in a nice free position, free motion, consistent without stopping the stick in any way. Well, I put this one in here called Crazy Eights. It's one I came up with years ago. Geez, it's been about 15 years now. 2005, I think, is when I sort of debuted this one. And Crazy Eights, the name's like the name suggests, it's like 8 in a hand, but it's crazy. So it's a little. If you look at the time signature, I'm not sure if you guys have this out now in front of you, but it's got a 1916 time signature to start with, which is one that isn't. You're not going to typically find a tune on the radio or in contemporary music with 1916 time signature. So it ends up being kind of interesting to count. But what I like about it is that it's an exercise that works the brain more than the hands. Right? So I find that when you play an 8 on a hand exercise and you're just kind of playing this, whatever, a lot of times our minds just sort of drift off, and we're just purely thinking about, okay, what am I gonna have for lunch today? Time's rehearsal over, let's see. Yeah, dinner was pretty good last night. What should I do after practice? Where we can easily just drift away and just sort of go on an autopilot. And I find an exercise like this is not as easy to do that. I like to really think of rudimental percussion in a cerebral sense, in something that might force you to count and subdivide and think about staying perfectly centered on the beat, as opposed to allowing yourself to drift slightly on the front side of the beat or slightly on the back side of the beat. With an exercise like this, it's very difficult to do so. If you'll notice on this exercise here, the bottom line there, it says click, right? So if I have the Met here at 120, well, with the Met going straight like this, right, and then we're going to count this. I can't really articulate it as fast as I need to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, it's 19. Think of it as 4/4 plus bucket de bum, or 17, 18, 19, 3 more 16th notes, right? So what is 4/4? It's 4 quarter notes in a measure. That's 4 is the top number, 4 is the bottom number, 4 quarter notes. Well, this is 1916. 19 16th notes in the bar. 4/4, another way to say 4/4, although we don't typically refer to it as this, we could call it 16/16. There are 16 16th notes in the bar. Well, there are 19 16th notes in this bar. So essentially, think of it as a compound measure, a measure of 4/4 and then 3/16. So I like to think of it as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 right, and that's the first 4 bars there. When you think about playing it with the metronome, it becomes a little more complicated. I'm going to put my met down here at, let's say, 92. And now the Met doesn't know that I'm in 1916. The Met is just keeping straight time. 1/4, if you will. Right? These are quarter notes. So if I was to play this over that straight quarter note, for right now I'm going to turn on a little subdivision. All right. So if we think about playing 1 and 2. You have to play actually 4 measures of it before you get back on the downbeats with the click. So it's essentially you're gridding the met. In that the second bar, the met is on the E. In the third bar, the met is on the and. In the fourth bar, the met is on the And then the fifth bar, you're back to 1 again. You're back with the downbeat. All right, so I wanted to try to play that first half with you guys here now together. And let's try the first 4 measures. I'll go ahead and count you off. We'll do it at the slower tempo, at 92. We're going to play 4 measures. All right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And 2. All right, so not your typical counting there. And if at any time you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to either put them in the chat, and maybe Tracy can jump in and ask if you know, hit me up with anything, and I'm always open for that. So hopefully that made a little bit of sense. Again, I know 1916 is not too common of a time signature, but I really like the way that we essentially grid it. And when you play it faster, obviously it becomes a little more challenging. But the counting and the phrasing involved in something like that is so much more to me than just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. That's the first and foremost concern, is to get warm and to get loose and to get the hands moving. But I like to warm up the head a little bit too, and find something really complex like this. Tends to set you up for, well, if I can do that, then the counting that's in the book or in the music, it's probably not going to be quite as challenging as that. So you've sort of set yourself up to be prepared for anything. You know, certainly I'm not saying it's the most complicated phrase in the universe, but it's not simple either. So it's something that can sort of open your eyes a little bit to some odd timing and phrasing and things. If I wanted to talk about the second part here, the 11/16 is analogous to, if the 1916 is 4/4 plus 3/16, the 11/16 is just 2/4 plus the 3/16. So in that case, that measure would be 1 and 2 and down. Or the other time, same thing, 1 and 2 and down. So the left bars are always the long ones, the 19s. The right bars are the 11s in the second half of the exercise. All right, so effectively we grid the Met 2 times in this exercise. And if hopefully you're familiar with that term, gridding, right? Maybe some of you have played an exercise like where you take 16th notes and you move the accents around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 E, 2 E, 2 E, 4 E, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and on. Right? That's the grid. You know, certainly popularized by Tom Float back in the day. I think he pretty much brought that to the drum corps, the rudimental drumming. And this is sort of a spin on that, in that where the Met is sort of jumping around to the different points on the measure because the bar itself is an odd meter, and where the Met is straight. All right, so essentially you have the 19, the 4 bars of that we went over. Then we have an 11, a 19, an 11, and a 19, which does the same thing as the 4 bars of 19. The first bar is on the downbeat. Second bar, the Met is on the E. Third bar, the Met is on the and. Fourth bar, the Met is on the And then that last 4/4 bar there is sort of like your reward after gridding the Met 2 times. Bam, we're back on the downbeat. And there's an implied release. Bam. It's not written there. I wanted to make it nice and clean with just 3 bars on a line rather than squeezing in a release. So just assume that there is a downbeat after that measure. All right, so let's try playing that entire thing. Crazy 8s. 4 bars of 19. Once we get to the 11/16, if you are marking time to this, if you'll notice the sticking on the click line, or I suppose it should be called the footing, if you will, because you're going to be on the right foot at the beginning of that 11/16 bar. And then when you get to the 4/4 bar at the end, you're going to be back on the left. You can hear my feet because I have a little pedal system set up. I like to use that. I have a little double pedal with a practice pad that lets me mark time but actually hear the rhythm that's being produced. So I find that works out well for my students when I do online stuff.
I do that a lot with drum set with my students, like making them use like bass drum and hi-hat for this kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
And for anybody that's out there, there's a book by Casey Cangelosi called Technical Timing that does a lot of this kind of like shifting over the like it has a metronome line that you're playing rhythms like over the metronome and stuff like that it's very similar to this stuff if you want to like keep going down that road.
Yeah, nice. Well, I won't spend the whole time on this because we only have a short amount of time together, but I like to just sort of introduce this. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. I'm going to take my Met up just a little bit. Let's go to 98. And here we go. Crazy 8s. 1, 2, da, da, da. Yes. Let's go a little faster here. We're going to take it way up. 110. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 4. Okay, so that's Crazy 8s. You can play a lot of different tempos, right? If you got faster, you're going to change your approach a little bit from being, fully all the way up with a full-bodied sound like that as it gets faster. Generally, I like to define the volume as coming down a little bit, the heights, if you will. It's going to be a little lower if I'm going to play fast. But generally, I want to make sure that the stick is in constant motion. It's not stopping at any point, right? I'm going. but I'm going to let it flow the whole time, you know, up to a point. I suppose if I played this slow, which probably never would, I would stop the stick at some point. But generally, it's kind of played around this tempo, this kind of range here, where the stick is in constant motion and doesn't stop. You could also do some send and tap patterns on this, which I haven't provided here, but one of the ones I use frequently is accent pattern 4, where I'm going to fill in all the eighth notes with left hands on the E's and U's. So I'm gonna, and then do an accent on all of the downbeats. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a da, 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 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a da, 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 da. You can fill that in with the same structure. You know, put rolls in there. 2, 3, 4, da, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, or even a single drag if we make a lesson 25. Okay, so have fun with that one. Let's see what kind of variations you can come up with on Crazy Eights. I'm going to move on to Flam accent mechanics. And I had a chance to demo this one a little bit a few months ago on the Percussive Art Society website when I did a Fundamental Fridays with them, and I did this one and a couple of these other ones here, and now I'm getting more into the 2-volume stuff that I was talking about earlier. Flam accents. It's such a fundamental, such a like a bread and butter rudiment, right? So many things in marching percussion are based on this. It works so well as a skeleton for other things to be added onto it. You know, add a diddle on the second partial, you get a flam drag. Add a diddle on the downbeat, and I get a cheese. Do both of those at the same time, and I get a flam 5. Right, but they're all based on this rudiment here. And when I want to make this rudiment better, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take one hand and figure out what it's doing. And here's my left hand. It's going to play this rhythm there. And that's what we have going on in this flam accent mechanics. So when I'm playing this rhythm here, no matter what hand it is, thinking of a couple things the whole time. I'm freezing down each accent. I'm making sure that I get a nice clear downstroke, and I stop the stick just above the head at the same level that my left hand is just sitting at right now. I try not to let it rebound up above that. All right, so that motion there, strong accent, a lot of weight behind each one. If I'm gonna do them at the same time. And I want to put a lot of weight and velocity behind the accent. Notice I'm using some arm to support the stroke. And I'm not just combining it with just a wrist only like I'm doing here. I wouldn't have one of my drum lines play it this way. I would always have them involve some forearm in the stroke at this tempo. Same thing on the left hand. I'm going to move my forearm up a little bit to get some more weight behind the stroke. Okay, so looking at flam accent mechanics here, that's the stroke that we're going to use. That's the technique. But now I invert the pattern a little bit. So we're going to do 2 times. And now we're going to reverse that. All right, the same thing on the left hand when we get there, which is measure 4. So back to measure 1, we're going to do this structure here. Measure 2, we're going to add in some taps on the opposite hand. We're going to fill in every possible place we can put a 16th note in, with the exception of the very last one. So if we think of that as 6 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Before I was playing 1, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I'm going to fill in 2 and 6 using that method of counting to make it all 16th notes. And what we want to accomplish here with this rhythm is a couple different things. The left hand or the right hand, depending on which one is doing the leading. In this case, I'm going to use the right hand as an example. The left hand is filling in. The left hand, by adding in those 16th notes, I want to have a couple things accomplished. I want the rhythm to be even. Right? No little gaps or one note further away from another note. All the same spacing. Secondly, I want to use it as so not only was it a rhythmic check like that, checking the rhythm, making sure it's even, but it's also a volume check. And that tendency I've noticed from a lot of players is to do something like this. Or you can hear my dun da da dun dun da da dun dun standing out louder than the left hands. I don't want that. I want them to be the same volume. So by adding that isolated left hand, it forces your right hand. It doesn't force, but it makes it more obvious if you aren't doing matching the volume. So it's a volume check. So I'm only doing that with my left hand. Well, I want to make sure that triple stroke on the right hand is as soft as those left hands are. Whatever volume it is. So if my tap sound is going to be way up here, which I don't necessarily play that way, but it's okay if you do, depending on what your style is. The point is at the game. So I like to play it way down here. But regardless, I want it to be the same. Right, 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 left, right, 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 left, right, 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 left. I'm going to try to keep that volume the same. And so we're essentially we put da 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 sort of on automatic repetition, and then we're going to slowly embellish that by adding the left hands in between it. Measure 2. Again, except for that last one. And then the third time, now I'm going to put a diddle on that isolated left. And then go to the opposite hand. So it's sort of a build-up. All right, we're going to play da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. We're going to add in the left hand. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Then we're going to diddle that added left hand. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Hard one to articulate. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's a tough one. All right, so let's try the first 3 bars. Let's do all 6, actually, because we're going to do all of that on the left hand starting on measure 4. Now, if you'll notice, I wrote dotted quarter note equals 50 all the way to 80. Oops, get rid of those notes. I'm going to take it up a little faster than that. So 60 here. Left hand, same thing. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you may find it difficult to keep the interpretation of that isolated 30-second note consistent, and that's part of the point. It's challenging to get that isolated diddle, make it spaced correctly and evenly, and I find that helps set you up for a rhythm like a flam drag, or even the first diddle on a tap roll, right? That's usually the part that if anything is going to error in a tap roll, in a snare line, it's typically the first diddle. You know, it's usually the first diddle fuzzes out, or the last one right before the release. Usually one of those two things. Once you get into the body, usually the roll can sound pretty good, but we'll either fuzz out the last note or we'll scrub that first diddle. Right? So by isolating these little diddles like this, you sort of get a lot of opportunities to get consistent on just playing that diddle cleanly. The second part of this exercise, we just cut it in half. Instead of doing twice and then twice, we're just going to do it once. And then fill it in. And then diddle it. And then do all that on the left hand. All right, it might be challenging, but it's you know, it is chopping with the stars, right? So I'm trying to build your chops. All right, so let's take it up a little bit, and let's do 70. Whole thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is, Flam accent mechanics. So try to play that one at a variety of tempo. You make sure that the added diddle or the added tap is balancing with the triple stroke on the right. Or I guess I should have said that the other way around. Make sure the triple stroke down low is balancing with the isolated tap or diddle on the opposite hand. You want an even sound down there. Moving on from here, well, I have Flam drag, cheese, and Flam 5 breakdowns. So another one that's really based on these kind of rhythms here. The Flam drag, the cheese, and the Flam 5. The hero rudiments, as I've heard Scott Johnson refer to them as. They're just fun, you know? I'd say this is the coolest rudiment in the world. If I was stuck on a desert island and only allowed to play one rudiment, Roger, you can only drum one thing for the rest of your life, it would be this. I just think it's just so fulfilling. It's just there's something about that rudiment that I think it hits all the right spots for me. So I just love it. Flam drag. And so this first one here, I've gone through a way that you can make those flam drags sound better. And that one of those ways is to isolate what one hand's doing at the same time. All right, so let me get the sticks off that throne. Right, so in the same way that this is Flam accent, the Flam drag is going to be just to diddle that final tap. Right there. Dun, da, 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 da. So that's going to be a diddled upstroke. So we're going to play downstroke. Play 2 taps. We're going to diddle that third tap, get an upstroke to get ready for the next down. So we're going to do 4 of these. And then 4 of these. We're going to do the same thing on the left. And then we're just going to apply this rudiment, both of those rudiments together. Flam accent, and then flam drags. 4 flam accents, 4 flam drags, 2 flam accents, and 4 flam drags, ending on count 4, just because. Right, so that last part is going to be... Huh. Or you could say, huh, or you know, you could just rest or whatever in the space, but it's just a built-in little thing to give you a pause, so that way you could go on and go to the next part. All right, so let's try this one. I wrote this one in dotted eighth, So as opposed to being which the other one was dotted quarter, we're going to do dotted eighth. I'll get rid of that subdivision there. So here's, let's do 112. And let's try the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 6 measures, 3 lines. 1, 2. Now diddle it. In the left hand. Diddle it. Flam accents. All right, so there you go. And then from here, we're going to do the same thing with cheese. All right, so cheese, what is cheese, right? That's when we diddle the flam, the primary note of the flam on a flam accent. So if that's flam accent, cheese is, it gets a pretty cool sound and play it fast. Right, so we have, well, again, isolating one hand at a time. We're going to diddle that primary note. We're going to do a diddle downstroke. And then play the 3 notes down low, third note being an upstroke. All right, otherwise it's the same exercise. So let's try that here with the cheese version. That would be measures 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Let's go a little slower. 108. 1, 2, measure 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Diddle it. Oops. Ooh. Shouldn't have slowed it down a little bit. I got a little fast ahead of the Met there. Let's try that again. Let's see if I can turn that up a little bit. Let's put my subdivision in there. I'm not feeling it today. Let's do that again. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And for anybody out there that wants to play it fast, let's do it. Let's play it at 130. Let's see how we do. 1, 2. All right. So the next one, measure 11, same idea. We're going to combine both of those diddles. We're going to diddle the primary note, and we're going to diddle the third note of the taps, upstroke. It's a little choppier because we have that motion there. It's a little tougher. Down, a diddle down and a diddle up. That's where you're going to find that your height and volume definitions start to suffer a little bit. You know, we ideally want those flam 5s to have that same volume definition instead of, all right, that's a flam 5 too, but I think the sound is far superior if you keep the taps down and soft. All right, let's try that to 120. We're at measure 13. 1, Flam 5. Now diddle the accent. Try to keep your grace notes nice and consistent. I opened up one or two of my flams in there. We want every flam to be the same spacing, ideally. Okay? So that's flam drag cheese and flam 5 breakdowns. Next one I have is flam exercise. Yes, it's a terrible pun. It's a flam accent exercise. Yes, forgive me for that horrible name. But it is what it is. Flam accent exercise. Flam exercise. And then just for kicks, it starts on the left hand. And then there's a couple little rules I've put in place here. The biggest one being that the first accent in a bar and the last accent in a bar do not have flams on them. So sometimes it becomes, I find it, most people think of flamming something as a way to upgrade or make it more challenging, typically. And that's true. But sometimes when you're expecting to play the flam and then you aren't playing it, like you're told not to flam this one, it's actually harder to do that than to just flam it again. So it's sort of a way to increase the challenge of the exercise. Excuse me here. So we're going to do, it's got this little rhythm here. I like exercises that are syncopated, like Crazy Eights. That's really syncopated and offbeat. The last one really wasn't too much. This one is, right? So if we have our time here, we have 1, N, E, 4, down, 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 down. So it's based a lot off on this rhythm here, most of the exercise. Right, so we have basically duggada, juggada, 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 right? It's just all alternating with a ending paradiddle in order to switch to the other hand. Paradiddle. Paradiddle. Then add in some tap and flam drag on everything except for the paradiddle. I'm gonna go a little faster. Ooh, not that fast. How about 100? Tracy?
Yeah, do you find that when you're teaching this exercise, they tend to like kind of float the non-flammed accents? Like if they change the touch and stuff like that, just leading because it doesn't have the flam?
It can happen, and what's the irony about that, I suppose, is that nothing changes about the primary note. When the fact that it doesn't have a flam, it's actually the tap, the soft hand. But yes, I find that many students will approach it differently and try to lighten up on it or play it with a different approach. And ideally, we want to play each one of those primary notes. It's the same, even if there's no grace note or there is a grace note. Either way. So this is sort of a exercise that tries to open your eyes to that, and that there shouldn't be any approach or touch change. Let's just say for my right hand, if I'm going to play a flam, and all of a sudden not flam it, no flam, nothing's changing about this hand anyway. It's only this low one down here.
No, I think it's cool though, because that's something that happens all the time in our books and stuff like that, but doesn't get addressed in an exercise context like this. So
cool. All right, so let's do the first 4 bars. We're going to here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Next idea is the same rhythm. It's still more that 1 up and E4, 1 up and E4. I tweaked up the check pattern a little bit and added some Swiss triplets in there. You'll see those little tenuto accents on the of 2 and the and of 3. That's just suggesting a louder note than a tap, but not all the way up to an accent. So it's sort of, I've heard the words natural decay used before to describe something like this. Right, I'm not necessarily trying to go make both of those notes the same volume, and I'm not trying to go all the way down to piano. It's sort of a middle ground. So we're going to do tap accent, flam accent, Swiss, Swiss, paradiddle. That's the check pattern there. And then here, we're going to add in diddles. We're going to not do the Swiss anymore. That was just in there for fun, sort of a slow cheese, if you will. It's the same kind of motion that cheese is, although not the same rhythm precisely. But so for at 7, we're going to go back to the same check pattern. We're going to add diddles on all those accents. For the first one, I have flams. Diddle. Diddle. All right, so we have duggada chuggada Swiss pear, duggada Swiss pear, diddle cheese pear, diddle cheese pear. All right, let's do that at 100. Bridge 5. 1, 2. Let's do that one again. 2, ready, go. Oh yeah, and I mentioned that last paradiddle. There's no diddle on that one either. I mean, just read the music, but yeah, it's not no diddle on that one. Just da 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 da. If you look, I think almost every bar in the exercise until measure 13, count 4 is always paradiddle every time. Sort of the recurring theme about this one. So I guess maybe I should have called it Flam paradiddle exercise or something like that. But flam accents is sort of what we're work here. Okay, and then at 9, yeah, we're going to add in some inverts or some one-handed flam accents. Right? Most people know flam accents as this. I did Swiss triplets a minute ago. Well, one-handed flam accent, right-handed flam accent is this. Well, we're going right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right. Our right hand has to do this. Or if it's on the left, we're getting it's a little choppier. So we're going to do duggada chuggada like always. Then we're going to do 2 flam accents off the same hand, and then the paradiddle. So what are we at? Oh, sorry, I'm describing it incorrectly. The second and the third one are the same. We have left, right, left, paradiddle. And remember earlier when I was mentioning that it's more difficult sometimes not to flan something than it is to flan? This an example of that. Going flam. No flam. Sometimes it's tough to do that. I go, but it's no flam. So and now we're going to put those flam 5s in, and again go back to the standard check of just alternating, none of those one-handers in there, which would be okay. So let's try measure 9, 10, 11, and 12. Remember those one-handed flam accents. Left, right, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right. And then the second part is just alternating. 2, measure 9, and... Two, again, and... Take that one as fast as you want. I like to, really refill it. So you can work up to that kind of speed. But notice, hopefully, I'm keeping the same volume and accent to tap definition. I'm still trying to do the same as I would if it was here. I try not to let it get to more monotone. Right? So I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for... So I really want to maintain that accent to tap definition. Visually, yes, but more importantly, sonically or audibly. I want to hear the difference between the accent and the tap as much as I see it. All right, so we just have a little progression. We play the check off the left and the right, then we flam drag and tap drag it. Then we go back to the check with the Swiss triplets. Then we do the cheese. Then we do the check with the inverts or the one-handed flam accents. And then we do the flam fives. And then there's a little tag here, the last 3 bars. Kind of combines staccato technique and a legato technique with some flam taps and some flam accents. Flam taps, of course, being very legato feeling. Flam accents being more staccato, more downstroke oriented. You have to quickly change between the techniques or those styles there. And the rhythm, this is the first time the rhythm deviates from the 1 and E4. So it's kind of a 3-bar little phrase. And it's just a little fun ending there. Tap accent, flam tap, flam accent, flam accent, flam tap, tap accent. Sort of a mirror. Da 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 da. That's that first bar, measure 13. Let's try measure 13. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, and 4, and 2, 3, one more time. You'll notice when you go from a flam tap to a flam accent, you have to hold on more for the flam accent. You have to let the sticks bounce more for the flam tap. And those 2 different touches kind of happen quickly. The next bar, we have a tap drag, invert, flam drag, invert, flam drag, tap 5. And of course, when I say invert, I mean inverted flam tap. Hopefully we know that rudiment there. Flam tap, of course, is right, left, left, right, right, left, left with a grace note. Inverted flam tap is we switch the sticking on the 2nd and the 4th and the 6th and the 8th, etc. Left. So right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right. Invert. Much more staccato and downstroke than a flam tap, which is much more legato and a bounce. I added a couple grace notes in there. So measure 14, we have tap drag, invert, flam drag, tap 5. There's your chops. Measure takes a little more chop control, a little more strength to really nail that. And make sure that you keep the tap 5 there at the volume, the 2 height definition. Ooh, scrub. You want to make sure that that still maintains that, and you don't go and just play it all 1 height. We don't want that. All right, so I want those tap fives to sound more like this and less like this. All right, so 13 to 14 we have. There it is. I played 15 as well. Whoops. Feels so good, I just kept going. 15, we have tap 5, paradiddle diddle, then toucha. That makes the first one e and a two e and a. One and a. Rest. E and a. Left down, right a shot. And then a nice medium volume sextuplet. And it's sort of like, yeah, I gotta slam on the brakes a little bit for that 6. Because everything is duple. Everything is 16th and 32nd up to that point. And finally, at the very end, it's like, we finally have a triplet at the very end. It kind of feels different than all the other rhythms that happened before it. So you might find yourself rushing unintentionally that 6, or playing it, and it's the only time that's really a sustained tenuto, like a medium volume. All right, so let's do your best to follow along. Let's play the whole thing. 1, 2, 1, 2, from the top. Yeah, there we go. Let's reef it. What does it say? 80 to 120 plus. Well, let's just go right at 120. 1, 2. Woo! Burning. So yeah, have fun with that one. Any questions on that? Everybody all cool? All right, seems like we're good. I have 2 more, triple double. So this one's more one volume, more vibrato exercise, kind of syncopated. I provided the quad parts and the snare parts and the bass parts, all of it there. So it's kind of a hocketed or a mixed up exercise. Each section plays a little bit different. Way back in the previous millennium, when I used to work for the Blue Devils and taught those guys back in 98, 99, 2000, we played this exercise here. And it's triplet version of double beat, right? So cliched stock standard double beat exercise would be 2 and E and 4 and 2 and E and 4 and people played some form of that. Well, this is more of a triplet and kind of mixed up. So here's my med at 130, and we have some doubles and triples. I'm playing the top line snare part, and then there's a 4 and a 2 and a 3. It's like 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 3. And then the same thing on the right. Another exercise that just starts on the just because, just to throw a left turn in there. All right, let's try the first 4 bars. 1, 2. And again. Oh, now we have some bum ba bum bum ba bum bum ba bum ba ba bum bum ba bum bum. It's kind of like a little Afro-Cuban feel, a little bit more rounded off, not quite so consistent count to count, but the rhythm sort of switches around. It's a hemiola rhythm. Ba 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 ba. Da, 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 da. And a couple threes. 2, 3, 2. Oh, that was measure 7 and 8. So 5 through 8. 1, 2. And there's no hints or taps or written. It's just no articulations in that way. Yes, you should every note is the same volume and not allow too much decay. But I think it's unrealistic to say that every note is exactly the same volume. I just don't think that's really how anybody plays threes. They say that's what they want. Don't let it decay. Make sure every note is the same volume. Well, look at me. My first note is a little bit louder than the second and the third one, even if I don't want it to be. If I really try and make every note the same, I find it to not flow.
Do you find it's musically unnatural?
Absolutely, it's unnatural. So like in theory, they should be the same volume, but in reality, there's a slight decay in volume. So what you want to avoid is that just going all in and say, well, it's going to decay. So then like we're not looking for that. We don't want it to go down to the ground, but to be truthful, the first note is going to be a little louder. The way that this sounds good, like Tracy said, musically, it sounds better than this. It's too stiff to try to play it all exactly the same volume. So there'll be a slight decay when I play triple strokes and even fours. The first one is usually a little louder than the others. All right, so did we play the second line? Not sure. Let's play it together. 5 through 8. 1, 2, left hand. All right. Now we have some threes and some fours, and then we get some consecutive threes and twos here at the end. Kind of just jumbled up here. A lot of switching on the hands that aren't on the downbeats, but on the second and third partials. You want to be as comfortable switching hands regardless of where in the measure it lands. I always think of the downbeats as the strong beats, quote unquote. They're the strong measure, and not in terms of loudness, but like it's where the foot would be, it's where the met is clicking. It's easy to quantify where that note is, but you should be just as comfortable switching hands on a note that is not on the click. And that's sort of what this exercise accomplishes here. And if you play it as an ensemble, it's really kind of cool sounding. There's a lot of mixed up parts in here. If anyone's looking at the tenor part, there is one little error in here that I should have fixed. The measure 8. There's some railroad tracks in there. Signifying a mute or a muffle or a skank. The third one should not be a mute, because you have to get ready to go. So it's going to be muffled shot, muffled shot, non-muffled shot. Third one shouldn't be muffled. All right, the quad part is totally different than the snare part, and the bass part is totally different than the quad part. All right, let's try the whole thing. Here we go. From the top. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And one more time. We try to have no gaps, even though I maybe wasn't perfect. Da, 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 da. Especially right at the very end, you might find yourself introducing some micro spaces that you want to try to work to avoid. Okay, so that was triple double. May find some videos of Blue Devils playing it back in the day. Probably not though. I did that with Madison Scouts for a few years when I was with them as well in the mid 2000s. Lastly, I suppose the least interesting exercise. Maybe I shouldn't have ended with this one, but it's the roll exercise that we play at the Blue Coats. It's not as rhythmically interesting. There's not much syncopation in it at all, but it's a sustain quality of sound, right? So, say if I put my Met, it's anywhere from 100 to 200. Let's just say we have it at 150 there. We're going to start on the right hand. We're going to play it all at piano. Of course, the Z's mean a buzz roll, right? So we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Oops. We're going to try to hold that 12 count buzz. Unless as we can, and try not to hear any or anything like that. One hand louder than the other. We want to avoid that. At Blue, we typically do each one twice. First one being on the edge. Actually, they do over here. Over to the side. I don't want to hit my microphone, so I'm going to say over here up to the front. I'm old school like that. I go to the edge at the front. Most lines today will do the edge thing, which is cool. But, right, so here we go. We're going to play that on the edge this time. 1, 2, oops, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, and then the second variation here, we're going to do all that again, just piano roll instead of piano buzz roll. It's going to be a double stroke roll. Let's do it on the edge first. 1, 2, second parts. In the center this time. We want to try to make sure that that last diddle is just as cleanly interpreted as all the rest. From here, we're going to add on some accents and take out most of the diddles and only do the first one after each accent. So there's going to be accent on 1 and 3. Otherwise, it's piano. 1, 2, 1, 2 on the edge. And again, in the center. we want to make sure that that diddle is the same volume as all the taps that preceded it. So the last thing we want to have happen is we don't want that diddle to creep upwards. We want it to be the same intensity down there. The next one, 31, or the fourth variation there, we're going to shift the accents to 2 and 4. So they're going to be on the left hands, and then that diddle will be on the right hand that follows each one of those left-handed accents. 31. 1, 2, on the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4. Center. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how it ends with a tap. Now we're going to put that together, and, well, I suppose not really together because there's no left-hand accents on this one unless you start it on the left. But we're going to play a long, extended tap roll. And the release of each one of those tap rolls will be a piano note. All right, so 4 counts a check, 4 counts a tap roll, 4 counts check, 4 counts tap roll, 4 counts check, 12 counts of tap roll. Long 3-bar roll. Let's just do it in the center, no edge. 1, 2. Same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can really hear any little inconsistencies or variances in that roll, and they are unintentional. We want it to be as seamless as possible. So it's a lifelong study, right? No one, at least no one that I'm aware of, can just say, I am the master of all drumming and I never make a mistake. It's not really that way. Maybe if you're Vinny Colaiuta or something, but most people, you know, you're always a student of the drums. You know, I'm 46 years old and I teach a lot of players, but I'm a student of the drums as much as I am a teacher of the drums. And it's a lifelong pursuit to try to improve and make your sound better than it was the day before. So it's very unlikely that you can just say, I have arrived and I never make mistakes. You know, it just is not that way. You know, everyone is, you always are trying to challenge yourself to play it better and smoother and more perfectly than the time before. Boom, 51. Now we're on variation number 6, the third one on the second page. We're going to start the roll low, and then we're going to end with an accent. A lot of times when I have a line that'll do something like that, they fuzz out the last diddle or two right before the accent. You know, and it kind of gets a little crappy right there. We want to focus on that. Make sure that the upstroke diddle has the same quality as the downstroke diddles, or the tap diddles did. All right, so we'll try to read this one. Measure 51, center of the drum. And again. Not a perfectly balanced exercise because we're really avoiding the left hand. So I would recommend you rehearsing this whole thing off the left. Left, 2, 3, 4, left, 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 right. And then we have the left hand release. right, left hand release. Don't avoid it. In fact, you should rehearse it more than the right, especially if you're a traditional grip player like I am, and you're right-handed. It's like I have two things going for my right hand: the matched grip, and I'm right-handed. So left hand is going to be at a disadvantage in two ways. So the only way I know to compensate for that is to do it more off the left than you do off the right. So if you're going to practice it 3 times, you should do it once on the right and twice on the left. If you're going to practice it 10 times, you should do it at least 6 times on the left and 4 times on the right. You know, one more at least than you do on the right hand to help counteract that. You know, if you're a left-handed player, then maybe you only need to do it, you know, you only have one thing going against you. The traditional grip is a little bit more challenging to make it even as the right hand is. But you gotta work that left hand and make it as strong as the right. The only way to do that is to rehearse it a little bit more, at least that I'm aware of. Where are we at? We're at the 3rd page. Tap 5s here. 2, 3, 4. 4 tap 5s, then they're going to release with a tap. The only exception being at the very end. We're going to go ahead and we're going to slam that 13th accent down with a downstroke. But otherwise, it's release every one of those tap 5s with a tap. Here we go. 1, 2. This is one that I highly recommend playing slow. Like 100. Pay attention to the rhythmic value. Can play that one with that interp, and not. Right, we don't want it to be some mutated rhythm. It's got to be. It's got to be that rhythm. If you can execute it at that slow tempo, you'll have more better chance of playing it with that same interp at a faster tempo. All right, and then the last one, add in some dynamics here. We're going to start with it at piano. We're going to crescendo for 4 counts. Then we're going to play this at forte. Notice I didn't say 12 or 15. It's forte. Pull out my tape measure again. I'll show you that that is not 12. And then down. And now we're going to do 1 bar of piano. And then a 3-measure crescendo. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. We want to try to evenly crescendo all the way through that. So let's do it. It's a little slow. 110. Yeah, blue coats will start in the middle. We'll decrescendo to the edge, and then we'll crescendo that last one for 3 bars back to the center. I'm not going to do that now, though. We'll just play it out in the middle. But here we go. Let's refit. 140. More time. Let's start again. Cut. Get my sticks together. You want to try to pace your crescendo so that you take the whole time to grow. We don't want to crescendo, 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 and then just stop for the last few counts. We want to take the time. And I think in the blue coats we actually do 4 counts low, and then start to crescendo and count 5. So we only do an 8 count crescendo. But that's sort of a way for the line to get a little bit more unified, to reduce the chances of being misaligned. I can't really say why we do it that way, but it's a 12 count crescendo. We want to make every stroke a little bit louder than the one before it. All right. Questions?
All right, we have some questions.
Okay.
All right, so the first question comes from Zach Melton, and he's wanting to know your opinion on the matched grip versus traditional grip debate in high school.
Yeah, I suppose it makes a lot of sense to do matched grip, especially in high school. That way everyone is developing a technique that is more universally applicable to other percussion instruments. That being said, my high schools do traditional on the snare. I find that I don't disparage match grip snare lines, not at all. I think that's absolutely fine. But in my opinion, the left-hand traditional grip is what makes snare drumming an art in and of itself. So I find that from a purely marching percussion standpoint, again, not necessarily talking about transferring to marimba or drum set or something like that, but from purely marching percussion, traditional makes the snare drum its own thing, right? If I'm going to play this way, then I want to play other drums. I want to play on other surfaces. Since I'm restricted to playing on only one surface, and a horizontal surface at that, and I'm not splitting it between others, I like the traditional grip just for the style, the approach, the late great Tony Williams of played with Alan Holdsworth, Tony Williams' lifetime, fantastic, amazing drummer. Had a really interesting thing to say about marching. What am I saying? Interesting thing to say about traditional grip versus matched, and that many people they want to do. I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm really not quoting him in any way, but a lot of people talk about trying to play the hands exactly the same, and it's like, well, I want a right and a left. Like, I want one hand to sound a little different than the other hand. When you're using this grip on the left versus this grip on the right, yeah, you might come up with some different things. You might have a different sound, but it's like a way of embracing those differences instead of, trying to make everything exactly the same. So from my standpoint, I like matched grip for just starting out with a player. I would never take like a elementary school kid and just have them go, okay, here we go. Here's how you play drums. Traditional. We're going to learn matched grip to start with. But I feel like the art of snare drumming is improved by traditional grip.
Cool. Here in the chat, Jake Neidert asks, what is your favorite percussion instrument and why?
My favorite percussion instrument would be drum set. My favorite marching percussion instrument would be, I'd say, snare. It's I like tenors a lot too. I played tenors or quads in high school as well as snare drum. In fact, I kept switching back and forth. I played tenors my freshman year, snare my sophomore year, tenors my junior year, and snare my senior year. So I just went back and forth every year. Partially because maybe I didn't have the longest attention span and I kept getting bored of one thing versus the other. But some other reasons too to help fill some vacancies in the sections and such, and that's just kind of how it worked out. But I really like snare drum. I like there's something about that sound of the rattle of the snare that just is satisfying to me. It gives me like it makes me want to play more, and I just love that cutting sound. I mean, it's in the middle of the drum line for a reason, not because they're the coolest or whatever. It has nothing to do with that, but just that sound that everyone can really lock into, and it defines the center of the pulse. It's such a short little sound that all the other tonal drums sort of enhance the snare sound. But I feel like the snare is like the center and the cutting sound of a marching battery.
Cool. We've got a couple of gear questions, actually. One, Zach Melton asked, what is your pad setup that you're using?
Yeah, this is the greatest pad I've ever used in my life. Drum Slinger Percussion. It is incredible. It's a tensioned snare drum head. It's a practice drum. Oops, sorry about that. Practice drum more than it is a practice pad. This has an Evans hybrid, white hybrid, just because I had some of these in my stash. I normally use a hybrid gray, but this white hybrid, you can really put any head on it you want, but it's got a fantastic feel and sound, and it has an edge versus a center. It feels like a real drum because the tension is really high, and it feels like playing on the edge. Like a pad doesn't do that. A regular pad is the same sound edge to center, but this it's just like on a snare drum where it feels better to buzz near the edge than it does feel. It's just an awesome pad. I hear they take a long time to get though, so it's gonna be, you order one of these from these guys and it take probably around a year to get it. They're not cheap either, but it's a outstanding pad. It's my favorite thing ever, and I'm not sponsored or endorsed by them or anything like that. Maybe one of my pad company sponsors might be upset with me for going off so much on this pad, but I love it.
So, along the lines of the pad, so two things that you are sponsored by. Jake Presnell asked, let me find it here. I love the design of your signature stick from Vic Firth, and would you mind giving a brief summary of your approach to the stick?
Sure. Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm big into drum set, and I like trying to bring the drum set world to the marching percussion world. You alluded to it earlier about I do the small drum kit in front of the blue coats for not just because I think it looks cool or whatever. I'm not trying to show off or anything like that, because I don't really play anything but just the meat and potatoes, as I had heard someone describe it. It's just playing the meat and potatoes, and then the drum line plays everything that's cool. But I really like the creativity, the flow behind drum set, and I think historically marching percussion is very rigid. Back in the 70s or 60s, or maybe it had been very wrist. Not that I'm disparaging that at all. It's where we came from, but very wrist oriented, and I like to use more of a wind up. I try to be a little bit more natural when playing marching percussion, and something like this stick here, the Vic Firth SRC. It's got a reverse taper here, in that it tapers inwards and then back outwards slightly. I really like the way that the stick responds, and the bounce and the feel created from that. It's just it's got a really great feel. I like a stick that's not too front heavy as well. And most lines, I find, tend to tape the front of their sticks and not the back, because it feels good to hold on to the wood, right, instead of holding on to the tape. And with that in mind, the stick is a little bit lighter up front, so that way when you put tape around it and you change the balance, the weight behind the balance of the stick by adding some weight up the front, it doesn't make it feel so cumbersome and heavy. Whereas a stick that's maybe a little bit more front heavy to begin with, then if you tape it, it just becomes like a log up front, and it's hard to have finesse for me anyway. I'm sure there's 1,000 players out there that could be as masterfully finesse with a real heavy stick up front. But just for my approach, I like a stick that's a little bit more weighted in the back, that tends to fly off the head a little bit, and allows me to play really light and fast, and like allows me to play real quick down low with that design. So kind of like say to use the Vic Firth catalog, to like more like a Ralph Hardiman stick than an MS2. Or MS2 is real heavy in the front, and the Ralph is more stacked in the back. And I kind of like that feel of just something that flies off the stick a little bit more.
Jake has also thrown in here, do you have a favorite rudiment or snare solo? Which you already went into your love for the Flam drag.
Flam drag all the way. Yeah, no question. Snare solo. My favorite thing I wrote was the Vortex snare solo. Yeah, man. These days, I tend to play all the stuff that I wrote. Some snare solos. I don't really have any names I'm going to drop right now. I like a lot of things that are out there. Anything that's written with creativity and rhythmic interest, I'm all about it. So, but Flam drags, 100%.
All right, Carlos Alonso Mendoza Osorio, who's joining us actually from Mexico, asked, what exercise do you recommend to increase your hand speed when playing the drums?
That's a vague question, because we could be talking about hand speed for double stroke roll, which is way different than a single stroke roll. Way different. So let's talk about singles. To increase your hand speed, I like to work on bursts of speed. So let's say I'm going to play eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then maybe a couple counts of triplets. One of my favorites for singles would be 8 on the hand, 8 singles off the left, 8 on the left, 8 singles off the right. Not 8 singles, but 16 singles. So wide, left, right, left, right. You could do that with double stops too. No singles. Back to double stops. That exercise for me is awesome for just getting loose and staying relaxed and not putting too much tension into it. For something like a roll, double stroke roll, similar to how I did a lot of this on breaking down Flam accents one hand at a time. All right, I'm going to do that same thing with the double stroke roll. So I want to find out what this feel here is. Notice how much arm I'm using too. I'm not just using my wrist like this. I'm using some arm to support that. But an exercise like this is one that I played back in like as a freshman. Eights, downstroke, fiddle. Eight on the left, fiddle. Four, fiddle. Four, fiddle. That's it. Staying relaxed, not putting too much tension in the hands, not holding onto the stick too tightly, right? We want that stick to be able to resonate a little bit and not totally tight, but I want to hear a little bit of the resonance behind the wood as we play. But there are no shortcuts, there are no secrets, so as much as playing with a relaxed feel, not too much tension, and just do it again. Play a lot of variety.
All right. Tyler Carpenter asks, how, if at all, do you adjust your teaching for indoor versus outdoor?
I suppose more the adjustment isn't so much my teaching as much as it is the approach to the drum. Outside we might play a little more aggressively because we're behind a 80-person horn line. We're all outdoors, so we might play with a little more finesse, than we would outside, maybe for more extended periods of time. We probably wouldn't do that drum corps as often as we did that with these guys a few years ago. It was all Mike Jackson, but it's you have the resonance and the support of the room and indoor. So there's the I'd say the primary difference really is in the orchestration. And that outdoor, you layer things a lot more. You have the snare drums and the quads and the bass drums all playing at the same time to really provide that thick support that can cut through the horn line, as well as not having any walls or ceiling or anything like that to keep the sound all contained. Whereas in indoor, you're a lot more likely to have just the snare drums playing on their own, just the bass drums, only the tenors, and then the moments where everyone plays together are less frequent than in drum corps, where it's more frequent that everybody's playing at the same time and less individual sections. Indoor, it's mostly individual sections, and then infrequently everybody plays together. But as far as my approach to it, it's not really any different in that I still expect the same level of excellence and communication amongst the players and preparation before and after rehearsal, even though we only really meet on the weekends instead of every day. So you get a little bit more continuity from the DCI experience because you see them Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, and now the show's on Saturday, versus indoor, it's like Sunday night rehearsal's done. Okay, we'll see you Saturday morning, show that night, and you have one block, and then it's like showtime. So it's you kind of expect a little bit more individual preparation on their own, versus in the DCI summer thing, I or the staff in general guiding every aspect of their practice because I'm seeing them every day. Indoor, it's on them a little more.
Yeah, I'm sure it has a lot to do inherently too with just the difference between Tom and Mike's orchestrational styles too.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. Kyle, who's actually in here in the chat, asked, "What's the best advice you've been given as an educator?" And he said, "If best is too vague, what advice most changed your approach to teaching?"
It's a tough question. I'm one of those people that started teaching immediately after I aged out. And so I had been playing. I did a year at the Velvet Knights, the VK, way back in the late '80s, and then a couple years later, I went up to Blue Devils, and I did 4 years in a row with them. And so, after having done that, obviously I got a lot better through those 4 years. And in fact, I was section leader my last 2 years. So, I my chops just went like this. So by the time I was aged out, I was just like on fire. I could really play anything, and it took me a long time to for to remember that I had all this experience, and then I would expect people coming in for their first year to be able to do what I could do as an age out, as who was the section leader of the Blue Devils, and then I would have all these rookies coming in, and I'm like, man, why can't you do this? Come on, and it took me a long time to learn perspective that, Raj, you're 22, 23 now, and you have these 18-year-olds in there that are, this is their first year of the Blue Devils, and you can't necessarily expect them to be able to do what you could do on the night of finals your last year, their first camp. So having some perspective in that way was something that I had to learn, and it took me a long time to learn that. And from an orchestrational thing, from writing as well, learning to not trying to make every single measure the hardest and most challenging measure in the history of the world, and to like pick your battles, and like this part right here is all about the flutes in the marching band, so we don't need to be playing something really really hard, and let's wait until the snare solo, or let's wait until some moment where the snares or the drum line is featured, and it's okay to have some bars that are easy. It's okay to have a couple measures that aren't the most challenging thing in the world, because it's not the time for that. So like restraint.
Well, because if you write hard stuff all the time, you have to clean hard stuff all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not going to fit musically because there's no time for it to breathe ever.
Absolutely.
All right, so two final questions that I've been asking everybody on this. One is, what is one tip or piece of advice that you would give to the educators that are out there right now? If there was one thing that you would impart to all the folks, especially the ones that are in band camp right now and stuff, what would that be?
Man, well, now is maybe a little different than any other time in the history of the pageantry arts, in that we're dealing with this global pandemic and such. So I think we really have to keep an open mind and being able to adapt to situations that we're not necessarily prepared for, but trying to keep some sort of motivation and purpose and reason for being in this situation we're all dealing with. It's challenging. It's frustrating. DCI was just pulled out from under our feet. We didn't have it at all. WGI, we were right in the middle of the season, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, last weekend when you had that show, yeah, that was it. You're done now. And we found out like after, like, oh, that was finals, for us effectively. So to try to be positive and find the joy in what you do have. And I think it showed that every minute is precious, that what we do get to do, because it could all be over and we don't even see it coming. So trying to find those moments of reflection before it's all over, to try to really think about how great an opportunity you have, and what the experience you're in right now, and try to find the greatness and the joy and the passion for it, and not necessarily retrospectively. We always romanticize what happened before. Oh man, back in the day, that was the bomb. Oh, I wish if it could only be like it used to be, you know. And I think we need to try to live in the moment a little bit more, and find something about what today's rehearsal on the field when there's no show and we're out sweating in the hot sun, but to try to find the joy in that and find the rewards on a more micro scale instead of looking at the whole season as a whole after it's all over, and then remembering how great, you know, this particular moment was. But you know, find the joy in the daily experience.
And then final question, if there was one piece of advice you could impart to the students that are watching this right now, what would you say?
Kind of along the same lines about finding the joy in every little moment there, but you know, maybe more specifically focusing on, let's get real technical here, you know, quality of sound and the rhythms that you produce are way more important than the flash. So, you know, I'll just speak for my line. You know, Bluecoats, I could not care less if you can toss your sticks around and do a million different back sticks and visuals and all that. I don't care. I don't care at all. What I want to see and hear is a smooth roll. You know, I want to hear definition from your taps to your accents. I want to hear rhythmic interpretation that is accurate and is in time and makes the music sound correct, and where you as a player are manipulating your sound to fit the music instead of manipulating the music to fit whatever feels good to you. So the musical integrity of what you're playing is way more important to me than the visual integrity. And I don't mean visual and marching and moving your body. I mean, you know, if I can do this or like that stuff. So many younger players worry so much about that. If they can do, you know, and that's just so bottom of my priority list from what I'm looking for when I'm accepting a member in the line. You know, not to say that you should never do that stuff, sure, but only practice it after you can play a role with a good sound. Like I've seen people that just like they want to like, you know, go and do stuff like that and play a role, and they can't play something that sounds great on the single surface. So less flash, more substance.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time to do this, Roger. I know that you've got a lesson to teach here in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm a little late actually.
Okay.
I don't know if you've noticed, I've been texting.
Yeah,
for like
I've
a few more minutes here.
But we appreciate you doing this. We appreciate everybody that did this along the way. It was great to get such a cool roster of people and stuff. And we appreciate everybody that's checked it out. All of the videos are up on YouTube. So if anybody wants to go back and rewatch any of them or go through any of them with their groups, I especially know a lot of groups are going virtual right now. So absolutely feel free to use all of these videos with your groups as online classes or whatever that you need to. And feel free to donate to UNA Percussion, because this kind of took the place of our summer camp that we normally host. So any funds that came in would be greatly appreciated. And beyond that, the only thing I can say to wrap this up is everybody please stay safe out there. There are recommendations of what to do and how to do it and stuff like that are in place. And they're there for a reason. And the reason is so that we can all get back to doing the things that we love and want to do as a group. Because so much of this is communal. And right now we're not getting that community. And I think that's what people are losing. So do whatever you have to do to get us back to the point of being able to get back together in person to do all of this. So everybody stay safe, stay happy out there, and we will see you. If all of this continues, we'll bring this series back.